DeAngelo. He's been in the industry for a long time. I'll let you hear from him. We just want to hear a little bit about you, what you're doing, what you've done. I mean, there's so much you've done, but like right now, the key points in your career, you've been in the industry for probably going on 15, 20 years, you know.
You're being very kind.
Yeah?
It's more like 50 years.
Okay, yeah, it's basically your lifestyle, you know, of everything you're doing. But I just wanted to, you know, hear more. I got the blessing to be here with you, and I think it's good that we talk.
Yeah.
And let our audience hear what's going on.
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah.
Great to be here with you today.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I, you know, like a lot of people, I fell in love with cannabis as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up at a time, I was growing up in Washington, D.C. in the 1960s, where there were a lot of demonstrations and protests and movements against various different types of injustice going on. And as soon as I consumed cannabis, I knew that it was a good thing. I knew that it was going to stay in my life. I wasn't going to give it up. And I also knew that I didn't want to be a criminal for the rest of my life, right? So I had to become a cannabis activist. I had to make cannabis legal or I was going to be miserable.
Yeah.
And so that's what first led me into it. But then I started studying. I was kind of a precocious kid, so I would sneak into the University of Maryland library. And I would have to dig pretty far back to find accurate information about cannabis because all the libraries and all the publications, everything in the United States kind of been scrubbed from 1937 forward. So I had to go really deep and do things like read the East India Report, which was commissioned by the British Parliament in 1898 and was actually a really extensive and scientifically objective study of cannabis. So I started learning the truth, that it was a medicine, that all of these good things about the plant. And I got really pissed off. And the more I learned, the more pissed off I got. And, you know, I'm the kind of person that, you know, if I'm feeling that way, and I feel like there's an injustice going on, then I need to stand up and do something about it. So for 10 years, 15 years, I was sort of your classic street activist, you know, handing out a lot of leaflets, getting a lot of petitions signed, working to just educate people, basic education, because at that time, hardly anybody knew the truth about cannabis. But after about 15 years, I started getting older, had a family I needed to support, and I developed a niche for creating legal cannabis businesses that allowed me to tell the truth about cannabis.
Nice.
And support my family and me. So the first one was a company called Ecolution, which I started in 1990. It was an industrial hemp company. I made blue jeans, shirts, briefcases, baseball hats. I made Adidas hemp shoes. So I did most of that in Eastern Europe and Romania, Hungary, the Czech Republic. And that was a great company for about 10 years.
Wow.
But I was continuing to be an activist in other ways at the same time. In 1998, I was the lead organizer and fundraiser of Initiative 59. This is Washington, D.C.'s version of California's medical cannabis initiative that had passed 2 years earlier. And I'd been out in California, I'd been involved in that, so I knew it was possible. And we ran this campaign, we got all these signatures, we got it on the ballot, we did the campaign. We won with 69% of the vote. But unfortunately, in the District of Columbia, the federal district, the federal government has supreme power, and they stepped in and refused to allow that law to be implemented. I had to sue them to get them to count the vote. So I figured that was a pretty poor reward for what at that point was 25 years of activism. So I decided to come out to California, where the 1996 law was beginning to be implemented. I had always had a dream of opening a legal cannabis retail shop. I'd been thinking about it for a long time. And I always wanted it to be like a temple to cannabis, right? To create an environment that just really celebrated the plant and all the great things that the plant does. And I got the opportunity to do that in 2006 when I was awarded one of the first 6 cannabis licenses in the United States of America.
Wow.
And I opened Harborside.
Congrats on that, man. I've seen you in videos, always seen you moving around, doing little bit of everything, you know, in the industry. So I think that's great. I want to give you a lot of, you know, respect for that, because it's not easy running a dispensary. And probably one of the first ones, everyone was telling you, what, you're gonna go to jail, this and that.
Oh, there were a lot of hairy times, right? I mean, in 2011, the 4 U.S. attorneys in California decided that they were going to close down the medical cannabis industry. They called us all criminals and profiteers. And so they started sending letters to landlords saying that they were going to seize the properties that we were located in if the landlords didn't evict. 600 dispensaries went down that way in like 3 weeks. It was devastating. It was the worst blow that we'd ever had since we started medical cannabis in California. But I'd anticipated that they might try to use this legal strategy of civil forfeiture, of seizing properties.
Right.
And I had written my lease in such a way so that my landlady couldn't kick me out.
Wow.
They had to take me to court and fight it out in court. And in my lease, I never promised to obey federal law. So I didn't break my lease. So I couldn't get kicked out of my lease. So I basically told the federal government that if they wanted to get rid of me, they can come haul me away in chains, but that's the only way that we're going to stop doing what we're doing.
That's interesting. I mean, I remember the federal letters we got in Colorado for being by a school.
Did you get one?
I didn't get one. I wasn't in those zones. However, one of my friends did. And I bought a grow from him because of that, because he had to liquidate everything within like 30 days or 60 days. I forgot how much, but that's the original federal letters that you're talking about, you know. That's crazy, because no one ever has heard of that.
Yeah.
You know, so that was probably the first one in the world that something like that would have happened.
I think, yeah, I mean, well, civil forfeiture's been a technique that federal prosecutors have used for a long time, but I think the Harborside case was the first time that well, the California case was the first time they used it as like a mass weapon against hundreds of people, hundreds of organizations at the same time. And I was the first person that, you know, had the legal grounds to stand up and fight them. They stopped. We you know, nobody thought we were going to win that case, and we won in local court, we won in state court, we won in landlord-tenant court, and we ultimately won in federal court. And, and after we'd beaten them up for about 4 years, they're like, okay, all right, okay, we dismiss this case with prejudice, meaning they can never ever bring it back again. But you were around in the very beginning too. So when did you get started?
2008. I was probably license number 36 in Denver. Started medical. I mean, I come back. I'm a contractor. That's my background. So we had the housing crisis went down, and they stopped giving loans. It was a big old mess. And I'm pretty sure you remember those.
I remember them as well. Yeah.
So I was looking for other opportunity. A couple of my friends, Vicente Cedarberg, they voted in the law. They were part of pushing that.
I know Brian.
Yeah, and then I just kind of knew of it, so I decided to get involved. And you know, we've done everything from get the building, do the architectural drawings, do the construction on the build out, bud tend, everything. You know, we've done everything, because back then we didn't have a bunch of people helping us and believing in us. There was a few that, you know, I have a couple people that have been with me since day one. You
That's
know,
great.
And rec, we have license number 6 in Colorado, but you know, we've been through a lot of stuff too, and I followed some of your stuff. One of my tax attorneys would always reference to your case when we had our tax issues, because you know they come around. You know, they come around, and that's one thing that people don't know of, like the stress and the not knowing what's gonna happen. But you've always fought it, and I've always wanted to try to, like, you know, it's there. You know, I believe in it so much too, and this turned into my life as well. You know, and I'm happy to meet you. And the other stuff now, we're going into phase 2, right? Phase 3. When is this going to end? Where do you see us in 5 years from now? Where do you see us in 10 years from now?
In 10 years, we'll be well on our way to establishing cannabis as the most valuable product on planet Earth.
Nice.
You know, we are already beginning to enhance and improve a whole range of industries, right? So, you know, you look at healthcare, and there's this very consistent pattern when you legalize cannabis and you make cannabis more available to people, the amount of pharmaceuticals, including opioids, that people consume drops. The amount of alcohol that they consume drops. The amount of domestic violence drops. The amount of violent crime drops.
Exactly.
All of these beneficial effects that flow out from it, right? Then we've got the replacement value of cannabis for anything that you make out of cotton or timber or petroleum. But cannabis not only doesn't pollute the earth the way that all of these other extractive industries do that contribute to global warming, growing cannabis actually tames global warming, because every hectare of cannabis that's harvested removes 20 tons of atmospheric carbon. Right? It's unbelievable, right?
That's always the way that I've presented to people that don't know, is with data. Data, hit them with data. You know, in Colorado we did X amount. You know, liquor sales are low, cannabis tax is high. So Colorado's a good model. I think it's it's not as big as California. We have about 5.5 million people, but it's a pretty stable market, you know, and we got pretty advanced with the law because of the law. You know, it was one of the first states, you know, to really regulate heavy, you know, really strict. Colorado, they and we keep getting new laws. You know, last week they just gave us a new law where any pre-roll that we sell or make after we receive our flower from our grow, we have to retest the pre-roll now. So we had to pull, this was like 2 weeks ago, we had to pull all the joints off, any smoke roll.
You have to test every joint?
We have to test batches of them. That's a new one that we got.
So first you test the batch that the joints are rolled out of, and then you roll the joints, and then you test the batch that the joints were rolled out of, except you pull it out of the joint.
Exactly.
Genius, right?
Exactly.
So what does this do? It increases the cost for cannabis consumers. How much more does it protect cannabis consumers? Absolutely zero. So this is a great example of the overregulation of cannabis.
Yeah, for sure.
Fortunately, in Colorado, you guys didn't go quite as far as we did with it in California. Now California is really the poster child for how not to legalize cannabis.
Yeah.
You know, they did two things at the same time. When we went from medical cannabis to adult use cannabis, well, they did more than two things, but two really destructive things, right? Taxes went from about 10% to 40%.
No.
40%. Think of anything else that's taxed at a rate of 40%. Nothing, right? And at the same time, they made it impossible for most of the growers in the state to get licenses.
Yeah.
So you have patients and then consumers who are running out of dispensaries with sticker shock, and they're riding right into the arms of growers who couldn't get licenses. Now that's good for the consumers and good for the growers, and I'm happy to see them work that out. But it sucks for legalizing cannabis. It's a really bad model. And I think in Colorado, you've been able to do a bit better with that. What's your taxes there? Like 15%?
We're like at 36%. It's 15% from the grow, which we call OPC.
Okay.
And then once you transfer the flower to the OPC, then you the grow pays 15%, and then the rec sale is another 17%.
Okay, where does it come out generally though when you combine the two?
So, for example, because when we transfer, we have metric that we use. Once we transfer a package from our OPC to the store, that's a certain tax when we pay our city and our state tax.
Right.
You know, so we have to pay that. We sell, we pay that tax from the grow, and then the retail tax, we pass it on.
Right, but it's different rates on different prices, right? So when you combine that, do you have a sense of where do you end up with your combined tax rate?
It used to be well, now it's AMR, average market rate.
Uh-huh.
But before, it was based off of, like, when they first made it, what you would sell it for. You know, so that changed.
Oh yeah, no. There's the same thing has been done in California, right? They decide what you should be selling your weed for, and then they tax you on that, rather than giving you the freedom to tax your cannabis at the price that you know that it should be sold at. It's crazy, right? That's not done with any other product, right? Not done with any other product. In California, cannabis is regulated more strictly than radioactive waste, right? More strictly than radioactive waste. I would wager that the same is probably true in Colorado. And so, like, this isn't just a harmless thing, right? What happens is that this carries a very, very heavy cost. It's already, just with reasonable regulations, more expensive to provide cannabis to consumers in the legal market. But then you add these ridiculous taxes and costs and procedures, and what happens is either people who really need cannabis can't afford it. Like, I hear from patients all the time say, since we got adult use cannabis, I cannot afford the medicine that my doctor is recommending to me. Or they go to the underground market. Some people have really established relationships and that's comfortable. But sometimes you end up with 72-year-old grandmothers on a street corner somewhere trying to get their weed, because that's the only place that they can afford it. So
yeah, that's a good point. Everyone always talks about recreational cannabis, but medical is barely talked about. Even when we come over here and talk about it in other countries, we were talking to the congressman. I brought Dr. Michael Dorr from Israel in 2016 to talk to the senators here, 2-3 different times, and they were literally falling asleep, getting on their phones, doing whatever they're doing. But when I started talking about the tax revenue, then they were more like interested, you know. So that's the thing that we have to really try to break. It's a tough job. There's so much work here as an industry. I think the stigma, that's another thing that we're really trying to change, you know, and I think it's happening, but it's us as an industry globally, you know, that are really have that job. You know, we got to break the stigma, show them that it's not a drug, it's not going to turn you into, you know, it's actually the opposite, you know, and that's really what I like doing. I really like traveling for this. It's taken me all over the world, you know. I've met so many different people, you know, and I'm happy, you know, to be from the U.S., but I'm Mexican. I'm first generation Mexican American. So I get to come to these countries like Mexico, which is my home, you know, that's where my family's from, and do it in Spanish. But I bring my American side out and I talk to them in English and Spanish and just do it in 2 different languages, and I've been having fun.
Oh.
And I see you having fun too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
This is our passion, this is what we love, so.
It's incredible, right? What's happening around the world. This spark that that we started in California, 30 years ago or so, is now just spread all over the world. And it was like I'm getting reports from people in like the Kyrgyz Republic, the Islahini Kingdom of Islahini, which used to be Swaziland, and it's incredible. I got to spend about 200 days on the road in 2019. 4 continents, a bunch of different countries, visiting emerging cannabis economies.
Wow.
And I realized this incredible thing at the end of those journeys, that today there are hundreds of millions of people around the world who have developed a personal relationship with the cannabis plant. Right?
Definitely.
Hundreds of millions of us. The UN admits that there's at least 270 million of us. I think there's a half a billion, maybe a billion of us, right? We are larger collectively, probably, than all but the very largest nations on earth, and maybe we're larger than the largest nations on earth, the International Global Cannabis Tribe. And wherever we are, we have had the same set of experiences with cannabis. We've learned the same lessons out of those experiences. We've developed a common value system out of those lessons. And it doesn't matter whether we're black or white or brown, or we speak Spanish or French or English, or whether we're rich or poor or in between or educated or uneducated or royalty or peasants, right? We can all be in a vibe with each other and groove with each other because we have this shared value system that centers around respecting creativity over conformity and respecting individual freedom over state authority, institutional authority, that honors nature over greed, right? That recognizes that every human being in the world and every creature in the world has value, this culture of radical inclusion and appreciation, and learning how to walk in a peaceful way, to turn our arguments into conversations, right? And it's this beautiful thing that's happening all over the world, and I think it may be the most important thing that's happened in 2,000 years.
Yeah, I agree. What's your favorite place you've been to, and where are you doing the next 5 years? What's your plan?
Well,
you move around a lot.
My favorite place is generally the place that I put myself, right? Because I like to go to the places that are really interesting to me. For a long time, that's been California. That's not true anymore. I'm really more of a pioneer than a settler.
Yeah.
And in the United States, the cannabis industry it's in a phase now where it's scaling up. It's becoming more institutionalized, and so it's time for me to keep on doing what I love to do, which is expanding the frontiers of cannabis freedom. So I will be spending a lot of time in Mexico. I will be spending time in just about every other country around the world that I can get to, that invites me, that thinks that I can bring value to what they're doing.
Well, man, we're gonna follow your journey, and hopefully we cross paths again.
Yes, I'm sure that we will.
Definitely happy to talk to you and get to know you better and listen to a couple of things that I've never even knew about you. And one other question.
Uh-huh.
What do you smoke? What do you like to smoke?
Well, what I really like to smoke in terms of flowers is Neville's Original Haze. I had to pick the strain that I was going to be stranded on a desert island with forever. That would be the strain. But lately I've really become a fan of live resin extracts, and I can't really say that there's any one particular strain that I love there, but I love a really nice, beautiful, clean, generally fruity kind of live resin extract, which I'll generally consume in a Puffco Peak. But I had this really
What's
bizarre...
up, Puffco?
Yeah, but unfortunately, all of these years of smoking are beginning to take a toll. So I have to be very, very careful about when and where I inhale cannabis now. So I make up for it with these little 100 milligram capsules, and I eat 4 of them for breakfast, and another 4 whenever I feel like it in the course of the day. It keeps me focused and jolly.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. Thank you for everything.
Thank you
for everything you do for us globally in the industry. It's a lot of work, to be done. So.
Hey, there's a lot of work. Fortunately, there's a lot of us. We are really a mighty army that grows by the hour and the day. More and more people everywhere are experiencing this plant, and not all of them. There are actually some people in the world who get introduced to cannabis who go, nah, not really for me. But I don't think they're in the majority.
No, I usually see the other way around.
Yeah.
What have I been missing?
Yeah.
I love this. Doesn't matter, as long as you're legal, or the people I've seen, 21 and older, a lot of people are coming around.
Well, a lot of people are coming around. They're not necessarily 21 or older.
No, it's usually the older ones. And also...
Yeah, you think that? Man, I'm so impressed by today's young people. I really am. It's like you guys are the smartest generation. You have this unbelievable ability to learn and to take in new information and to synthesize it into new ideas and get shit done. There hasn't been another generation of human beings that's been capable of what you guys are capable of. Not in my study of history, not in my 50 years of trying to organize other generations to get things done.
Oh, that's
your
good to hear.
parents' generation? I don't want to call any generation useless, man.
You hear that, youth? This is a generation to get it done.
Yeah.
You heard it from the man. Peace.